This is a story about a cat, or to be more precise, it's a collection of stories about a cat that, according to legend, belonged to the Prophet Muhammad, who isn't a historical figure that you'd normally think of as being a cat lover. But that presumption all changed when by chance I had a conversation with a friend who vacationed in Qatar last year, who told me he was struck by the sight of seeing so many cats in that predominantly Muslim country, roaming freely in the city streets and in the parks and in the shops, all seemingly healthy and well-fed. He even spotted them walking in and out of the mosques, he said, as nonchalantly as if they were a regular member of the congregation, which brought on a chuckle, as you might imagine, but at the same time inspired me to do a little digging, where I discovered that Muhammad was an ardent advocate for the humane treatment of animals, due in no small part, the story goes, to the influence of his cat, Muezza, who would often saunter through the congregation who were sitting in the mosque listening to the prophet's sermon, then jump up onto the dais where Muhammad was preaching, curl up on his lap, and promptly go to sleep. And ever since then, cats have had free reign within Muslim communities. I mean, who would have guessed, right? So the deeper I dug, the more stories I uncovered about Muezza and the Prophet that not only illustrate the contributions Muezza made to the advancement of animal rights, but as well portray a softer side of Muhammad that historians often overlook. So from all of these stories, I've chosen the best 5 and cobbled them together to paint a picture of a time and a place in history and of a cat who won the love and affection of a fiery prophet, and in so doing, left her mark on a small piece of that history herself, which was a big accomplishment for a little mother cat. As you'll see in this collection of 5 short stories I've entitled Muezza, the Prophet's Cat, which goes like this. During the 7th century in Saudi Arabia, the Prophet Muhammad fought a series of battles in defense of his capital city, Medina. And one very famous one was known as the Battle of Uhud, which was fought on a plain at the foot of Mount Uhud, a few miles north of Medina. Now, when most people think of Saudi Arabia, where Muhammad was born and this battle was fought, they think it's all desert. And for the most part, it is. Except that the city of Medina is located in an oasis. I'm sure you've heard that term before. An oasis is a fertile green area in the middle of a desert that has lots of water. So Medina, being an oasis, was primarily an agricultural community where they grew wheat and corn and had orchards of olives and dates. And they also grew hay to feed their camels and horses and sheep and goats. So on the morning of the battle, Muhammad and his forces had to march north through the city and then through several farms in order to reach their positions to begin this fight. When along the way, marching through one of these farms, they came upon a mother cat who was nursing 4 tiny kittens beside a big pile of hay, when suddenly Muhammad called his troops to a halt. "Commander," his surprised lieutenant asked him, "why have you stopped us?" "Look," Muhammad pointed toward the mother cat and her kittens. "There." "What of it?" his lieutenant asked. "She will move or get trampled? What is it to us? What happens to her?" "But my friend," Muhammad pointed out, it is for your benefit as well that I stopped you. For it has been revealed, whoever is merciful, even to a sparrow, Allah will be merciful to him on the day of judgment. You will stand here until the troops pass, then come again to regain your place. So the lieutenant stood guard, directing the troops around the mother cat and her kittens until every last man, horse, and wagon was passed. Then he galloped back up to the front again to take his place beside the prophet. Well, as it turns out, the battle that day didn't go well for Muhammad. Fortunately, however, most of his troops were able to safely retreat to resume the fight on another day. And on the march home, when they reached the field where they had previously found the mother cat and her kittens, sure enough, they were still there. So Muhammad scooped them up, set them into the back of one of his wagons, and brought them home, where he named the mother cat Muezza. And the kittens? Well, he let the children of his generals name the kittens, and after they were weaned, he gave one to each of them. Now, thankfully, the next battle didn't take place for another 2 years. And when it did, Muhammad's forces won. But in the meantime, once Muezza and her kittens reached Muhammad's home and settled in, her reign as queen of the household began, as now she held the title of the prophet's cat, to whom even the prophet himself deferred. Now, legend has it that Muezza, which by the way means cherished in Arabic, was an Abyssinian, a favored breed of cat kept by the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. So even before she held the title of the prophet's cat, Muezza was royalty, and she showed it by conspicuously choosing her napping places where she knew Muhammad would sit, except when visitors came. When a foreign leader or a diplomat arrived, Muezza would invariably walk over and sit in their lap, expecting to be petted, which often made a contentious negotiation go much easier. But when Muezza avoided someone, the prophet took notice. One day, a delegation of Bedouins came to confer with the prophet. There was a famine in the land, and they came to ask Muhammad for some financial support in order to buy food. The Bedouins, however, had not converted to Islam. They still worshiped the pagan gods, and so they had no religious claim to receive any money. But when they came to see Muhammad, they sought to deceive him, claiming they had secretly converted to Islam and thus were entitled to those funds, which was the issue at the center of their negotiation. So as their discussion ensued, the Bedouins sitting on one side of the room, Muhammad and his advisors on the other, who should saunter in but Muezza? Ye, Abul Qasim, the Bedouins pointed, which was how Muhammad was greeted by outsiders. Abul Qasim, how is it you allow an unclean animal to enter the room? Which positively shocked the Bedouins, who would never ever think of being anywhere near a cat or allow a cat anywhere near them. But the cat is not unclean, Muhammad shot back. It is one of those who go around among you. But to the superstitious Bedouins, cats were looked upon as demons. Besides, Muhammad chuckled, she is one who advises me. Love of cats, you know, is part of the faith. Oh, well, yes. The Bedouins shook their head in a sudden change of heart. We've just come from the desert, was their excuse. So how do we know? But Muezza was having none of it. She could see through the Bedouin's ploy and kept her distance, to which the prophet took notice. Surely, Muhammad chastised the Bedouins, Allah knows every hidden thing in the heavens and the earth. Allah sees all that you do, which instantly sent a shudder of fear coursing through the Bedouins. What did he mean? They asked among themselves. Did he read our minds? How could he know? Then they looked over at Muezza, who was staring at them with unblinking eyes, which so unnerved the Bedouins as a bad omen that they confessed their deceit. Ya Allah, they blurted out. We have been untruthful. Funny, isn't it, how animals can detect bad intent in people? Nevertheless, even though the Bedouins had tried to pull the wool over the prophet's eyes, Muhammad was sensitive to their suffering. And in the end, he gave them some money and sent them on their way. This third story tells of a frightful incident that happened to Muhammad some time before he found Muezza and brought her home, when his life was saved by a kitten that belonged to his good friend Abu Huraira, that began to inform in a significant way Muhammad's thinking about the keeping of cats as pets, which was something that was unheard of in the Arab world up until that time. Now, Muhammad's friend, Abu Huraira, was an interesting character who carried around with him a little male kitten wherever he went, that he kept in a satchel that he slung around his shoulder. And one day, Abu Huraira was called in haste to hurry to the Prophet's house. When he got there, Muhammad was sitting perfectly still and didn't return his greeting. When an attendant whispered in Abu Huraira's ear, Abu Huraira, a venomous snake has crawled into the sleeve of the Prophet's robe. Now, Arab robes, as you likely know, are flowing and loose-fitting, and their sleeves are quite large, so that when a person is sitting, the hem of their sleeve will actually touch the ground. Thus, Muhammad didn't feel the snake crawl into his sleeve until he raised his arm, then felt it wriggle and knew right away what it was. So Abu Huraira carefully set his satchel down close to the Prophet's open sleeve so that his kitten could get a good look. Now, cats, as you know, are patient hunters. If you've ever seen one stalking a bird or a squirrel in the backyard, you know they'll crouch down and then take a few quick steps and freeze. Then take a few more quick steps and freeze once again. And so it was with Abu Huraira's kitten. Rather than charge straight away into the Prophet's sleeve, it waited, allowing that snake to grow more anxious. Until at last, thinking that it was now or never to an attempt an escape, the snake slowly began to crawl to the open end of the Prophet's sleeve, its tongue flicking wildly in and out, sniffing the air. And just as it poked its head out, the kitten pounced, grabbed that snake from behind the head, then pulled it from the Prophet's sleeve and ran outside, whipping that snake back and forth until it was dead. Everyone in the room was dripping with sweat. A few beads even appeared on the Prophet's forehead. And from that day on, it said, Muhammad treated every cat he met with kindness and respect, which boded well for Muezza and her kittens when he found them some years later in the farmer's field. This fourth story, which is quite popular and often told about Muezza and the Prophet, has for centuries shaped Muslims' attitudes towards cats and the treatment of animals in general, alongside the actual teachings found in the Quran, which begins one morning when Muhammad is preparing to attend morning prayers, and he sets the robe that he wants to wear out on his bed, then goes into another room to wash up. When he comes back, he finds Muezza curled up on the sleeve of his robe. Now, if you've ever been owned by a cat, you know that this is something that they will do to test you. Lie on the clothes you want to wear, as I said, to test you. And Muhammad, being a wise man, he was wise to that. So, Muezza, the Prophet said, you want to give me the test, huh? Now, I suppose that Muhammad could have scooped Muezza up and gently set her off to the side, something I likely would have done and failed the test. But and this is strictly my opinion, but I believe that incident with the snake and his life being saved by Abu Huraira's kitten affected Muhammad on a deeper level than perhaps was apparent. So rather than disturb Muezza, Muhammad instead went to get some scissors, and then he cut the sleeve that she was sleeping on off from the robe, then put it on and went to the mosque wearing a robe with one sleeve shorter than the other. Imagine if you went to church like that, wearing a coat or a dress that was missing a sleeve. But Muhammad, they said, never gave it a second thought, as by then he was completely immersed in prayer. Later, when he returned home, it said that Muezza returned the gesture and bowed 3 times to the Prophet, who then stroked her head and went looking for a needle and thread. So I think it's fair to say, through these first stories and now into this final one, that Muezza knew perfectly well how to pull the Prophet's strings, which she did with feline grace and affection for 8 years that they were together in the latter part of Muhammad's life. And after he died, for another 8, with Muhammad's 3rd wife, Aisha, who loved Muezza every bit as much as her husband did. But 16 years is at the upper end of the normal lifespan of a cat. And one day when Aisha awoke, Muezza was not on her customary cushion, nor was she anywhere in the house, nor outside in the places she normally napped in the yard. Finally, Aisha found her out in a field beside a pile of hay where Muezza had crawled off to die. So Aisha gently scooped her up, reminiscent of an earlier day when Muhammad did the same on his way home from battle, then buried Muezza beneath an olive tree just outside the mosque compound where the Prophet was laid, which is the final story in this collection, except for a brief epilogue which serves as both a eulogy and a teaching, in that there is placed great emphasis in Islam that the teachings in the Quran were revealed to Muhammad directly by an angel, but not all. According to Muslim scholars, some teachings were revealed to Muhammad through his observation of people and even animals, since Allah resides in all. Muezza, I think these stories bear out, falls squarely into that latter category, for which the Prophet, to his benefit, took notice.